Hello everyone and welcome back to The Deep Dive. We're the place that dives deep into the sources so you don't have to get bogged down.
Great to be here, ready to jump in.
Absolutely. Today we're tackling Meta's big splash into the AI pool, the Llama 4 models. We've got Scout, Maverick, and a little preview of the giant Behemoth.
That's right. And the big question really is whether these models actually live up to all the hype Meta generated with their announcements. Is it all smoke and mirrors?
Exactly. That's what we're digging into. We'll be looking at Meta's official claims, what they said these models can do.
And crucially, we're comparing that to independent evaluations. We pulled info from Meta's own blog posts, tech news, benchmark results from third parties.
And of course, the chatter from the community. Places like Reddit and Hacker News always have interesting takes.
Definitely. The goal here is to cut through the marketing spin.
Right. For you, our listener, this deep dive should save you a ton of time and give you a clear, unbiased picture of what these AI models can and maybe can't do. We want you walking away with a well-informed perspective. Sound good?
Let's do it. So first up, let's just lay out who the players are again.
Okay. We have Llama 4 Scout and Llama 4 Maverick, both launched on April 5th, 2025.
And then there's Llama 4 Behemoth. Important to stress, this one was still just a preview, still in training, as of early April 2025 when we gathered this info.
Good point. And we should probably mention Llama 3.3, which came out back in December 2024. But we're focusing on Llama 4 because, well, there seems to be this feeling that the latest promises maybe didn't fully land.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment of the general sentiment. So let's talk about those promises. What exactly did Meta claim? Starting with Llama 4 Scout.
They didn't hold back, did they? They called Scout the best multimodal model in the world in its class. Straight up.
Bold claim. They also said it outperforms all the previous Llama versions. And interestingly, that it runs on a single NVIDIA H100 GPU.
Which is still a pretty hefty piece of hardware, mind you. Not exactly consumer grade.
True. But maybe more accessible than needing huge clusters for some tasks. They also touted an industry-leading context window of 10 million tokens.
10 million tokens, that's massive. Theoretically, it could remember a whole book, right?
Theoretically, yes. That's the idea behind large context windows processing and recalling vast amounts of information.
And how did they say Scout stacked up against the competition in their own tests?
According to Meta's internal evals, Scout supposedly beat Gemma 3, Gemini 2.0 Flashlight, and Mistral 3.1.
In what areas specifically?
Coding, reasoning, long context tasks, and image understanding. They positioned it as ideal for things like summarizing long documents, analyzing user activity, reasoning over large code bases, that kind of thing.
Okay, and technically, anything about its architecture?
Yeah, they mentioned it uses a mixture of experts, or MOE architecture. Specifically, 16 experts with 17 billion active parameters out of a total of 109 billion.
Right, MOE, where different parts of the model handle different things.
Got it. Okay, what about Llama 4 Maverick? Did the hype train continue?
Oh, absolutely. Same energy. Maverick was also called the best multimodal model in its class.
So they had two best-in-class models launched simultaneously.
Apparently so. And for Maverick, they went further, claiming it outperformed GPT-4o and Gemini 2.0 Flash across quite a few benchmarks.
Wow, GPT-4o and Gemini Flash, those are big names. Any other comparisons?
Yes, they claimed it achieved results comparable to DeepSeek v3 in reasoning and coding.
Okay.
And this was a key point they made with less than half the active parameters of DeepSeek v3. They framed Maverick as a product workhorse.
A workhorse, meaning for general use.
Pretty much. General assistant tasks, chat applications. They highlighted its skill in understanding images and text across 12 languages, creative writing, and coding.
And they probably mentioned costs, too. You bet. A best-in-class performance-cost ratio was the phrase used. It's also a MOE model, but much larger, 128 experts, still 17 billion active parameters, but out of a massive 400 billion total parameters.
400 billion total. Okay, these numbers are getting huge. Which brings us to the biggest one, Behemoth. What was the story there?
Behemoth was positioned as the master model, an absolute giant. 288 billion active parameters and nearly 2 trillion total parameters.
2 trillion, good grief. And the claims.
Meta claimed it surpasses GPT 4.5, Claude Sonnet 3.7, and Gemini 2.0 Pro on various STEM benchmarks, science, tech, engineering, math.
But as you said, this one wasn't actually out yet. It was still cooking.
Exactly. Still in training during the Scout and Maverick launch. But Meta did say that knowledge from Behemoth was kind of distilled down into Scout Maverick to boost their abilities.
Okay, so Meta painted a very rosy picture, powerful, efficient, leaders in their class. But what happens when we look beyond Meta's own announcements? What did the independent evaluations find?
Right, this is where the picture starts to get, let's say, more nuanced. Take the Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index. They scored Scout at 43 and Maverick at 50.
And how does that compare? Is 50 good?
It puts Maverick ahead of Claude 3.7 Sonnet, which is decent, but notably behind DeepSeek v30324, and Scout's score was more in line with GPT-4 Mini.
So, competitive, maybe, but not necessarily blowing everyone else out of the water like the initial claim suggested. What about that Elmerina ranking Meta promoted?
Ah, yes. That caused quite a stir. An experimental chat version of Maverick did rank highly on Elmerina for a while. Elmerina uses human preference votes to rank models.
But it wasn't the public version.
Correct. And that was the core of the controversy. It wasn't the model people could actually access and use. It generated a lot of debate about whether that result was, truly representative.
It sounds a bit misleading, potentially. Okay, what about coding? Meta seemed pretty proud of Scout and Maverick's coding skills.
Well, independent tests using a tool called DevQualityEvil told a different story. They found both Maverick and Scout actually lagged behind some smaller models in certain coding tasks.
Lagged behind smaller models. Which languages?
Particularly in Java, according to those tests. So that directly contradicts some of Meta's claims about coding prowess.
Interesting. And what about that massive 10 million token context window for Scout? Did independent tests back that up? How did it actually perform on long texts?
This is another area with significant discrepancies. Tests run by Fiction.live, specifically designed to test long context understanding using 128,000 tokens.
Which is long, but nowhere near 10 million.
Exactly. And even at 128K tokens, performance was poor. Maverick hit about 28% accuracy and Scout only 15.6%.
15%? Ouch. How does that compare?
Well, Gemini 2.5 Pro scored much, much higher on the same tests. So it really casts doubt on the effective use of that huge context window.
So having a 10 million token window doesn't mean much if the model can't actually use that context effectively for complex tasks, right?
Precisely. It raises serious questions about the practical utility. What good is remembering everything if you can't reason accurately about it?
Good point. Okay, let's shift to the community. What were the vibes on places like Reddit? People using these things day to day often have good insights.
The reactions on Reddit were definitely mixed. You saw quite a bit of disappointment, actually. Some users felt the performance didn't live up to the hype, especially compared to models like Mistral or Quinn.
Any specific complaints cropping up?
There were concerns about Meta's focus seemingly shifting to these huge MoE models, perhaps at the expense of improving smaller, more accessible ones.
Ah, the accessibility angle. Makes sense.
And some people reported specific examples, like Llama 4 Scout apparently underperforming the older Llama 3.370B model on tasks like language translation.
Really? Underperforming an older version? That's not a good look.
No, it isn't. There was also speculation, just chatter really, that maybe Meta rushed the launch a bit, perhaps feeling pressure from competitors like DeepSeek.
Interesting theory. Were there any positive experiences reported?
Oh yeah, it wasn't all negative. Some users, particularly those with limited hardware, found Scout surprisingly capable and efficient. So, sort of contradictory experiences.
Okay. And what about Hacker News? They tend to be pretty technically focused and skeptical over there.
The tone on Hacker News was generally even more skeptical, I'd say. Some comments were quite harsh, calling the launch a disaster, or suggesting Meta was falling behind.
A disaster? Wow. Strong words.
Yeah. There were discussions raising concerns about Meta's internal culture, maybe pushing for performance metrics above all else, potentially leading to half-baked releases.
The move fast and break things culture possibly impacting quality?
That was the implication some users were drawing. And again, the benchmark manipulation controversy, especially the Elmerina situation, came up quite a bit. There was just a general air of suspicion.
Okay, that suspicion seems like a good bridge to digging into Meta's evaluation methods more closely. That Elmerina benchmark thing sounds like a key point of contention.
It really was. Meta heavily promoted Maverick's high ranking there.
Yeah.
But as we said, it was based on an unpublished experimental version.
And did Elmerina itself comment on that?
They did. Elmerina clarified that Meta's interpretation of their ranking policy wasn't quite right, and essentially said Meta should have been much clearer, that they were using a custom-tuned model, not the publicly available one.
So Elmerina basically called them out on it.
In a professional way, yes.
Yeah.
It definitely raises serious questions about transparency and how representative those highlighted results really were. If you're using a special version just for the test, it's not really an apples-to-apples comparison, is it?
Not at all. It feels like gaming the system.
Sure.
And then there were those other, even more serious allegations about maybe training on test data.
Right, that viral Reddit post, it cited a Chinese report alleging there was internal pressure at Meta to sort of blend benchmark test sets into the training data during post-training.
To basically teach the model the answers to the test.
That's the accusation, yeah. The idea being to inflate the scores and meet performance targets. Now, it's crucial to state that Meta's VP of Gen AI, Ahmad Al-Dali, explicitly denied this on X. He called the claims simply false.
Of course, you'd expect a denial, but the fact the allegation even exists and gained traction.
Exactly. Whether true or not, it fuels that user suspicion we talked about regarding Meta's whole evaluation process. Trust is easily damaged in this space.
And we've already seen that independent tests often show different results anyway, right? Especially in long context and coding.
Correct. There are clear discrepancies. Why? Could be different testing methods. Maybe Meta used highly optimized prompts that regular users wouldn't think of.
Or maybe they just selectively reported the benchmarks where Llama 4 looked best.
That's certainly a possibility. Cherry-picking favorable results while downplaying areas of weakness. It happens.
Okay, so with all that context, let's put Llama 4 side by side with its main rivals. How does it stack up against, say, GPT-4 and GPT-4o?
Well, Meta claims Maverick beats GPT-4o on some multimodal benchmarks. But as we saw, independent scores put Maverick closer to GPT-4 Mini in general intelligence.
And what about specific skills?
Other benchmarks suggest GPT-4o still has the edge in coding based on human-able and complex reasoning, like the GPQA Diamond benchmark.
So a mixed bag, but Llama 4 Scout has that huge context window, right?
That's a key difference, yes.
Yeah.
Scouts claim 10 million tokens versus GPT-4o's 128,000. That's a massive gap, even if the effectiveness of Scout's window is questionable.
Then cost.
That's another potential advantage for Llama 4. They are generally significantly cheaper to run than the top-tier OpenAI models.
Okay. What about Google's Gemini models?
Similar story. Meta claims Scout beats Gemini 2.0 Flashlight, and Maverick beats Gemini 2.0 Flash on several benchmarks. But Gemini 2.5 Pro seems very strong, especially in reasoning and coding, potentially outperforming Llama 4 there based on available data.
Yeah.
Again, Llama 4 Scout has the context window advantage over current Gemini models, which go up to about 1 million for 2.5 Pro.
Yeah.
And Gemini, like GPT-4o and Llama 4, also has multimodal capabilities.
Right. Seems like a recurring theme. Meta claims leadership. Independent tests show it's more competitive than dominant, with specific strengths like context length or cost. How about Anthropic's Claude?
Independent benchmarks suggest Maverick performs similarly, maybe slightly better than Claude 3.7 Sonnet on some general intelligence metrics. Claude models are generally respected for strong coding and a focus on safety.
Context window comparison.
Llama 4 Maverick's 1 million token window is larger than older Claude versions, which were around 200K. So again, context length is a potential plus for Llama.
So it seems like while Llama 4 isn't necessarily the undisputed king Meta presented, it does carve out a space, especially with cost and context window size, right?
That seems to be a fair synthesis, yes. While Llama 4 Scout and Maverick definitely show progress, there's quite a bit of evidence suggesting they don't fully deliver on all of Meta's ambitious promises.
The Elmerina controversy definitely hurt their credibility on the benchmarking front.
Absolutely. It
Huh.
raises serious transparency concerns, and the independent evaluations showing limitations in long context understanding, despite the huge claimed window, are pretty damning.
Plus, the mixed and often skeptical community feedback.
And the fact that Meta's claims of superiority over competitors just aren't consistently backed up across the board in independent tests, it all points towards Meta, perhaps, selectively presenting the data.
Focusing on the wins, maybe downplaying the losses.
It looks that way, particularly regarding those benchmark rankings and the real-world effectiveness of the long context capabilities. Llama 4 models are definitely significant additions, but users and developers should probably take the official claims with a grain of salt and look at a wider range of evidence.
Right. Okay, we're nearing the end of this deep dive. It's been pretty revealing, hasn't it? Lots of layers to peel back.
Definitely. It shows that while these models are advancing rapidly, the reality of their performance is often more complex than the initial marketing suggests. Llama 4 has strengths, but also clear limitations based on current evidence.
So for everyone listening, here's something to chew on. Considering these discrepancies we've uncovered between the official story and the independent findings, what does this whole episode tell us about the current state of AI model evaluation? And maybe more importantly, How critical is that independent scrutiny in cutting through the hype?
That's a great question to ponder, especially as we look towards even bigger models like Behemoth on the horizon.
Indeed. How do we balance the excitement of announcements with the sometimes less exciting reality of current performance? Food for thought.
Definitely.
Okay, that wraps up our deep dive for today. We really hope peeling back the layers on Llama 4 was insightful for you all.
It's been a fascinating discussion. Thanks for tuning in.
Our pleasure. Now, before you go, if you found this breakdown helpful, do us a solid and hit that like button. Drop your thoughts and comments below. We genuinely read them.
Yeah, we love hearing your perspectives.
And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next deep dive. Oh, and ring that notification bell. You know the drill.
Stay curious, everyone.
Until next time, keep diving deep. Bye for now.